Hey guys, what's up and welcome to a new Tesla update video. So today, as per usual, let's go over Tesla, let's go over the market and figure out what we can expect moving forward into next week and potentially the rest of the month for Tesla stock. Yeah, so as usual, if you enjoy these videos, if you find them helpful, informative, useful, whatever, I would appreciate a like button on the video. It does help a lot and that's all I ask for. This is not financial advice. I am not a financial advisor. And of course, if you enjoy this kind of information and you want more of this information and especially happening or this information as I see it and essentially live, if you will, as the market is trading, well, that's exactly what I do in my membership section. The link is down below for just $2.99 a month. $3 we'll just say. You get access to all of that information every single day. So all that being said, let's just jump into it if you enjoy it. Yeah, anyways, I said all that. Jumping into it, Tesla closing the day up about 1.5%, closing at pretty much 177.5 per share. Not too shabby compared to the market. Let's take a look over here. Market pretty much flat once again, right? QQQ pretty much non-existent move. SPY pretty much non-existent move. So a nice little outperformance today on Tesla overall, which is nice to see. But keep in mind, like I said yesterday, you know, the market is still extremely overextended. It's bullish, but it is very, very overextended. So that can potentially affect Tesla if the market decides to correct about 3% from here. But we'll talk about all that right here, right now. So as usual, in this video, we will talk about the bullish aspect and the bearish aspect, both sides to the story, because in my opinion, if you look at only one side, you're a fool. You always want to look at both sides. So let's start with the bullish perspective here. What's the bullish perspective here moving forward? There's quite a bit, actually, in my opinion, and this is what I was telling my members. I'm about 75% bullish, 25% bearish heading into next week and potentially even further beyond that, really, for the next, like, maybe even several weeks, right? But let's talk about the bullish aspect. So first and foremost, obviously we had this massive run up from earnings. We had a massive run up to almost $200 per share. Then we started slowly selling off, creating essentially what looked to be a bull flag, which we broke out just earlier this week. Came back, retested at several times. We held the retest. We held that level, right? We held the gap fill over here pretty much at 172, which is great. We didn't quite gap fill all the way down here at 168.2. We got very close to it, but we didn't get quite to it. If I go over here to the 1 hour chart, you can kind of get a better idea, right? This was the gap fill right here. We didn't quite get to that gap fill, again 168.5 we'll say, but pretty darn close to it regardless. But the most important thing to notice here is the fact that we did at least fill this gap here. We are holding this general area. If I zoom out over here, you can see this volume profile spike over here on the right. You know, it's kind of point of control area that we are holding as well. So we're holding all these pretty crucial areas, to be completely honest. And as if that wasn't enough, we're you know, we have a resistance here of the 100-day moving average at 190, so we'll talk about that soon. But we are holding 21 EMA, bam, right in front of us. We are holding the 50-day moving average, bam, right below us as well, pretty much sitting at what, 170, we'll say 171. So we're above all those, which is great, right? But we're below the 100-day moving average, we're below the 200-day moving average still, so there's still work to be done. But the fact that we're above those, we're about above one of my favorite, which is that 20-day moving average, which is pretty much this white line over here. We're above that as well, bouncing almost perfectly off of it for the past couple of days now, right? Holding around it and bouncing off of it almost to perfection. So we're holding a lot of these crucial key elements, right? These key, you know, levels, if you will. That's a good sign. Like, that's a damn good sign, especially showing some strength here on a, you know, fairly, not necessarily weak market day, but a pretty non-existent market movement day, right? Market didn't really do anything today, right? The MACD is still arguably flipped bullish, though obviously on the daily chart, it's, you know, pretty close to flipping bearish, but it didn't, and that's all that matters. It did not, right? So that's a good sign. The stochastic, you can see here, hasn't officially flipped bullish as well. So in my opinion, heading into next week, in theory, assuming the market cooperates, or at least Tesla just ignores the market for better or for worse, really, it seems like it wants to move higher a lot more than it wants to move lower. Now, that doesn't mean that the move lower, you know, is not impossible, which we'll talk about the bearish side soon. But all these key factors that I just mentioned, seems like the bearish, the bullish aspect and the bullish side seems pretty prevalent in my opinion, right? Just my thoughts, of course, keep that in mind. Also the weekly candles, right? Looking great for Tesla here. I don't know why this is showing this. Let me quickly go over here. We'll talk about this very soon as I quickly switch this to just being shown on this interval, so it's not messing up my weekly chart and looking super ugly. I should do it for this bull flag too. Anyway, the most important thing on the weekly, there's two very important things, both of which are bullish, actually, right? First and foremost, obviously, we officially now do have that weekly MACD crossover. A pretty nice looking crossover, too. I would say it's a pretty convincing crossover. It's not like a, you know, teensy-weensy crossover. It crossed over. There's no question about it. It's crossed over. You can't argue that, right? That's obviously bullish. Now, obviously, take it with a grain of salt, as if, you know, this isn't the only thing that matters. For instance, we had a bullish crossover here after this, obviously, you know, massive fall right here on the weekly MACD. We had a bullish crossover for 2 weeks, then we just continued falling even further. I don't think that'll happen again, but it may, obviously, but I don't think it will. In my opinion, this is definitely a bullish sign. On top of that, we also have two things on the weekly candles. I'll remove the drawings for now. But on the weekly candle, we have two things. We have a bullish harami candle. Let me just go ahead and show you what that looks like, right? Pretty much this right here, right? We have a bullish harami candle where you can see, right? You had a massive downtrend, right? Where we had, of course, not a massive downtrend, but, you know, a downtrend nonetheless. Two like pretty nice red candles, especially last week's red candle, pretty bearish. A lot of people were bearish on this weekly candle. I remember that. People were saying how Tesla is going to continue down even lower, but we kept talking about how, yeah, I don't think it will. We kept saying that, right? And it did not, at least so far. But as you can see, it's a pretty simple, you know, concept. Massive red candle, pretty much a green candle that is essentially an inside weak candle, right? Which is another thing that's important to understand here. But a bullish harami candle, potentially signaling a reversal at the very least to, you know, the 190s in my opinion. But again, we also have a weekly inside candle. What does that mean? Well, it makes things thankfully a lot easier for us to decide on the direction that we move next week. It's quite simple. The way you look at these inside weekly candles, especially a weekly candle, is if next week we break below the week that we just finished, lowest point of the week, right? So in this case, on this week, the lowest point we were this week was pretty much 169. If next week we break below 169, consider the bearish, you know, trajectory or the bearish, you know, side of things, if you will, here, quite probable. In fact, most likely the case and the path that we'll take, which if that were to happen, I do think it'll bring us back down to the low 160s, like 163 to 160, right? I think that will happen. If we break next week the low of this week that we just closed, again, pretty much 169. Now, on the flip side, if we break above this week's high next week, which in this case, right, you can see here, the high of this week was pretty much 180 on the dot, right? If we break above 180, that confirms that most likely we continue upwards even higher, at the very least go into the 190s, if not potentially even the high 190s to potentially my 205 target, you know, within the next couple of weeks, which I still think is a realistic target. But it becomes even more realistic if we break back above and start closing candles, especially above 180. But even just breaking the price action next week above 180 is a good sign, because that's usually how you play these inside, you know, day candles, inside week candles, essentially inside candles like this. You pretty much go, you know, a break above or below the previous candle's trading range, which again, like I said, this week's candle trading range was 169 to 180, right? A break below 169 bearish, a break above 180 bullish. And that's the way you want to look at it. And I do think it leans into the bullish favor here, again, for all the reasons I just mentioned, plus the fact that it is a bullish harami reversal candlestick pattern on the weekly time frame. So those are, in my opinion, are all the bullish aspects of Tesla. In my opinion, like I said, I'm about 75% bullish, 25% bearish. Now, like I said, you know, you'd have to be a fool not to at least, you know, look at the bearish aspects, right? Kind of like if you just invest in a company, you know, just do the fundamentals, right? Like I'm a bull on Tesla as the company. I'm a long-term bull on Tesla. I think that it'll be one of, if not the most valuable company in the world. And I think betting against Elon is a fool's task and a fool's errand. I really do. I strongly believe that. But, you know, you're still a fool for not also looking at the bearish potentials of, you know, the fundamentals. Same concept, right? And same thing happens with trading. You know, you don't only want to be a perma bull or a perma bear. I think that's probably the worst mistake you can make. So let's take a look at the bearish aspect of Tesla. What can be bearish here? What can throw this off? And what can make us actually move down, you know, below that 169 to really trigger that move even further down to 163 to 160? Like what can trigger that, right? What are those aspects? Well, let's take a look at that, right? So let's go over to, let's bring the drawings back. Let's go over to the 4-hour chart. I have it set up right here, but like I said before, you know, we could potentially be setting up a bear flag here, right? We said this yesterday and it's still intact. You have the pull right here. This moved from 199 all the way down to about this 167, 168 level, massive move downwards. And then now we're pretty much setting up a little bit of almost like a dead cat bounce from this, you know, drop that we had here, which essentially is a bear flag right now, which is the literal flag itself. And then of course, assuming we break down below, we move even lower. So one thing you can take a look at is if this bear flag does lose or break down below, sometime, honestly, even like early next week, Monday or Tuesday, if we lose like really like 174 to make it simple, 174, 175, if we lose that general level, consider this bear flag potentially to start doing its thing and we potentially play it downwards even further, which also will probably lead us back down to, you know, that 163 to 160 level. That's probably the most, in my opinion, this is why I'm only 25% bearish, because this is probably the main thing that the bears have going for themselves right now, right? There's a lot more bullishness in my opinion than bearishness, but if there is a bearish thing to look at, it's absolutely this situation right here that we find ourselves in with this potential bear flag, right? Doesn't mean it has to be, doesn't mean it will play out, right? A bear flag or a bull flag, it doesn't doesn't mean it will play out in, you know, a bearish or bullish fashion. It just means that, you know, it has a higher likelihood of doing so. It just doesn't mean it has to, right? On top of that, the next bearish thing I'll talk about here is going to be, well, there's a lot of bearish flow on Tesla that came in within the last, like, you know, 3 or so hours. You can see here, right? A lot of puts came in. A lot of them are pretty sizable too. You had a 1.4 million put, 180 strike for July 19th. You had a 1.4 million put again, 170 strike this time, but for January 2025, right? And you had a lot of puts here, but there's only 2 calls in this flood of puts, right? And again, you had a 400K here, a 230K here, a 660,000 put here, right? 190 put for what is that, next week even. A lot of these puts are coming in for next week, right? Some of them were, of course, you know, you can see here 517, 517. So some of them, don't get me wrong, were for I mean, people are just gambling on 0 day to expire puts over here, it seems like, which, I mean, it's kind of ridiculous. But nonetheless, you know, even taking those aside, there's still a decent amount coming in for, you know, this month, right? Next week, the week after, you can see here 531, 524, right? Coming in for, you know, next week, the week after, some a little bit further out, like we just talked about the $1 million put for July 19th, right? The one for January 2020. So the point I'm trying to make is a lot of puts came in. A lot of puts came in on Tesla here that, you know, is a little bit eyebrow raising. Let's just say that. I always take options with a massive grain of salt because we don't know the true intention behind this. It could just be a hedge. Maybe they don't think it'll go down. It's just a hedge. We don't know. We don't know the whole picture. That's why you always want to take this with a grain of salt, and just blindly following options usually is a fool's task as well, in my opinion, of course. But it is still something that, you know, kind of raises your eyebrows a little bit. It's like, well, that's interesting, right? To, you know, take that into account. That's important to understand. And there was one more thing I wanted to mention, right? The market, right? You know, the market is overextended, right? Bring out the bands over here. You can see, well, we're overextended. The market is very overbought right now. SPY, QQQ, like they need a correction here. Like it really feels like they want to correct. Will they actually correct? Well, nobody knows. Maybe they won't. Maybe they'll go even higher. Who knows? But the point is that you know, the risk versus reward here, in my opinion, not super favorable for the bulls, mainly because it is just extremely overextended. Now, with that being said, you can see here, you know, the market did push up pretty aggressively and it stayed overextended for quite some time. It did come back to revisit the mean several times, but it bounced off and went up and up and up every single time. So, you know, it can obviously do that. And I think that would be the thing that would annoy a lot of people, because I think a lot of people are waiting for a correction. And if the market just continues to rip, I think a lot of people will be very unhappy and people will begin to FOMO in, if not already, honestly. But at the very least, I'd still want to see the market not really, you know, crash or anything, but at least correct back down about 3% to this average median line, which is that white line, which even during this massive uptrend, it still did that several times, right, throughout that uptrend. I just want to see that happen again, which I think is a pretty damn good likelihood of happening within the next week or two, personally. And again, it's just a matter of, will that affect Tesla? Will Tesla ignore it and do its own thing, or will Tesla be dragged down by the market? That's a question that no one has the answer to, unfortunately, but, you know, something to just consider as part of that bearish thesis as well. So again, this is why personally, in my opinion, Tesla looks great. A lot of great things looking for Tesla here in terms of just a bullish continuation moving forward next week, the week after, into June, etc. But, you know, there are still some bearish flags and bearish, you know, signs and cautions essentially being thrown out that, you know, you don't want to completely ignore as a bull. And myself being a bull, I'm also not just completely ignoring that, right? So today, by the way, on today's push, we did have a slight increase in volume, still pretty low volume, to be completely honest with you, but at least it is higher than yesterday's volume. So that's at least somewhat promising, but, you know, still fairly on the lower end of the volume spectrum. But nonetheless, that's kind of what I'm seeing. So let me know what you think down below. Ladies and gentlemen, if you enjoyed the video, don't forget to hit that like button. Hopefully I helped you out. Again, if you find this useful, don't forget to hit that like button. And of course, you can also join my membership section for $3 a month, where I share all this information live every single day throughout the day as the stock is trading. And my members always get it first, right then and there as I see it. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you tomorrow, or Monday rather. Peace.